America's Voice family.
Are you on Getter yet? No?
What are you waiting for?
It's free.
It's uncensored.
And it's where all the biggest voices in conservative media are speaking out.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
That's right. You can follow all of your favorites. Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, Jack Posobiec.
And so many more.
And the best part?
You can watch Real America's Voice right there on Getter.
Live.
So join the conversation.
Hop on the Getter chat room.
Engage with patriots who are just like you.
Good morning, Getter friends.
We're breaking news, we're delivering the truth,
And we're doing it on Getter
Every single day. So don't wait. Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
It isn't just an app. It isn't just a social media platform. It's a community. Good evening, America. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you as always from the nation's capital and the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. Wired to Fish Coffee, you know this, my favorite coffee. It's the official coffee of Just the News, and it can be your favorite coffee too if you go check it out. Fishcoffee.com. Wiredtofishcoffee.com. Use the promo code JustNews at checkout. You get 10% off. It's a really great deal. All right, we start tonight with some new developments on the COVID vaccine. This coming from Senator Ron Johnson, who's been on this show for the last 2 years, warning that we would learn about this. He has raised the alarm about newly uncovered documents that reveal that federal health agencies, including the FDA and CDC, were aware of heart inflammation risks tied to the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines, but delayed notifying the public. These documents highlighted in a recent Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations report came out today. Just the News had it first. Suggests officials downplayed these risks, delaying critical transparency that could have informed Americans' health decisions much sooner. The report states that then acting FDA Administrator Janet Woodcock tried pushing back on a CDC plan to let healthcare providers know about the heart risk associated with the COVID vaccines, and that effort reportedly ended up getting a formal notification by the CDC rejected, slowed, stopped down the meeting. You were kept in the dark. Instead, the CDC just put a posting on their website about it. No one goes and reads the back pages of the CDC. You get how this game is played, right? And turning to some immigration news now, a 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals Judge James Ho went out of his way to sharply criticize the Supreme Court for blocking President Trump's efforts to deport illegal immigrants under the Alien Enemies Act. Ho, a Trump appointee, argued the court's decision to halt the removal of 2 Venezuelan migrants, alleged members of the dangerous Tren de Agua gang, undermines the executive authority to secure the border. Supreme Court's 5-4 ruling, which sent the case back to a lower court, is a roadblock to President Trump's efforts to secure the border. This judge went out of his way to write a letter and just express his dissent. It's really pretty remarkable. All right, time to bring in my amazing co-host, Amanda Head, as we do every point of this show. Amanda, you've been watching a lot of headlines and do a lot of work inside the White House, too.
Indeed.
What do
you
got cooking?
Yes, all right. So we saw some fireworks today in the Oval Office as President Trump hosted South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. And as you would expect, the subject of the white South Africans fleeing persecution from that country and coming to our country came up, and President Trump did not hold back, playing video with the voice of South African politician Julius Malema. And here's what that looked like earlier today, and it was a spectacle and quite uncomfortable.
Require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do. Who are you to tell us whether we can occupy land or not? We are going to occupy land. South African occupy land. That's who we are.
The video went on for minutes, with South Africa's Ramaphosa regularly looking away, obviously trying to interject, and President Trump saying, "Be quiet." And as I said, it featured politician and former member of Ramaphosa's party, Julius Malema. So you may know Malema from the clips that are going around the internet of him and thousands of other South Africans singing and chanting, "Kill the Boer" and "Shoot the Boer," Boer being South Afrikaners. And President Ramaphosa reacted after the video, saying this to President Trump.
Our government policy is completely against what he was saying, even in the parliament. And they're a small minority party, which is allowed to exist in terms of our constitution.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can
and then
take
when
land.
they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
So, John, I would argue that we have a small faction of radical liberals in our own country as well. But as much as I disagree with their methods, they're not exactly going around torching farms, murdering farmers.
Well, they were torching Teslas.
Yeah, indeed.
But anyways,
indeed.
yeah.
And businesses during the BLM.
Listen, this is going to get a lot more investigation. And I was just, before the show, I was going back through the State Department human rights reports in the Biden era. And they did report hundreds of farm murders over a 3 or 4 year period. Now, it doesn't break it down by race. I'd like to find out that. We're going to dig further into this to find out who's telling the truth. But there is a farm murder problem. Even the State Department went out of the way to say it's part of the human rights abuses. Whether they're white or black farmers, we're going to get into that. We're going to try to get the victims list for all that. We'll come back to you. But we'll get this resolved. Facts are a stubborn thing. We'll get to the bottom of it. But it was an awkward moment, but something needed to be said, and I guess it was said. All right. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, we're very lucky to be joined at the top of the show by one of Congress's newest members. He's from the state of Florida. He's already making his presence well known in Washington, Congressman Randy Fine. Congressman, great to have you back on show today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. You are working hard, along with all the other members, to get this big, beautiful bill across the finish line. I've been in Washington 35 years. A lot of things in this bill were being talked about by Republicans when Ronald Reagan was still president. It achieves, if it gets passed, a lot of the checklists of the conservative movement for a very long time. How important is it to get this done? And what do you say to your members, your fellow members who might be holding out?
Well, look, if they want to fight to preserve Medicaid for illegal immigrants or to fight a border wall, if they want to side with Democrats, they can. I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, remember, the only bipartisan nature of this will be opposition. So Republicans will support the bill. The question is whether people want to side with the Democrats. I mean, look, this preserves tax credits. It's going to reduce taxes on Social Security. It's going to make permanent the Trump tax cuts. It's going to cut spending where we need to cut it in ways that we've never seen. And more importantly, it's going to show that Republicans can govern and that we support our team captain, Donald Trump. And that's why I'm all in.
Yeah, makes sense.
Congressman, if this doesn't pass, Americans will feel it pretty much right away because those Trump tax cuts will expire. But if it does pass, what will Americans feel? What will be the earliest indicators that this is a successful bill?
Well, I think you're going to see stabilization in the market. So I used to teach economics, and one of the things we taught is that temporary tax cuts aren't as good as permanent tax cuts, even though they cost the same on an annual basis, because people can't plan around temporary tax cuts. If you don't know if your taxes are going to go up, you may not make investments. You may not buy a house. You may not buy a car. You may not know what's going to happen. And by creating certainty for people, we're going to help. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we are not a big, beautiful place for illegal immigrants. And as those people start to leave, in Florida, we will see things like car insurance go down. We have a huge tax in Florida on illegal immigration. It's called uninsured and underinsured motorist insurance, and it never gets talked about. It's the single largest line on some people's car insurance. So as we tell illegal immigrants, go home, we're going to see the cost of living come down as well. And I just think the amount of positive things that are going to come out of this bill will be extraordinary.
Those are great positives.
Yeah, and you know, they're ideas that have been on the table a long time. This Congress is getting them all in one bill, getting it done. It'll be a remarkable thing. There is an idea floating around it. It's actually remarkable that a president doesn't have the lawful authority right now that if he gets exactly the job done that Congress wanted for an appropriation, maybe there's $1 billion for a bid, and the president gets it built for $8 million. There's no direct vehicle for him to just give the money back. He has to go through a rescission or an impoundment, and both of those have been very difficult in the history of this country. There's some language floating around. My reporting's detected. It's been on the show. People have been talking about the last few days that a couple lines that could be added to this bill or a future bill that would say, hey, if a president meets everything Congress asked him to do, met the intent and the actual deliverables, and he does less because he was a good negotiator, of course he can give the money back, and Congress would be okay with that. Again, the language will matter. It's got to get ironed out. But that common sense idea coming from the state of Florida, where there's lots of common sense, how would you feel about something like that being stuck in the bill?
Well, I think it's a great idea. Look, the existential crisis that faces our country is our debt and our deficit. And if I'm frustrated about one thing that I've observed in my first 6 weeks doing this, it's that people don't seem to understand that Rome is burning. Yeah. I mean, I'm amazed that people come to my office and they ask for more money. And I say to them, you guys understand how much debt we have, how big our deficits are. We need to be not asking what our country can do for you. We can ask what we can do for the country. Instead, it's been turned around. Ask not what you can do for your country. Ask what your country can do for you. And so anything that we can do to be cutting spending, we ought to be doing.
Yeah,
great point.
Currently sitting at what, 1.6 trillion in spending cuts, but there are some folks who want even more. Is there any chance that you can eke out more?
Well, I hope so. I mean, certainly, look, I'd like more. But what I have to remind people of is this. I mean, look, I'm new, but I think we're going to consider other bills after we get this one done. So there's nothing that says we can't keep cutting down the road, and I think that we need to. The most important thing is that we get something passed. And the problem that we have is half of the House is Democrat, and they have no desire to govern. They will blow up the country in order to make sure gang members can stay here, kill Americans, and get welfare. And that's what we're dealing with. So we've got to basically get every sane person to support the bill in order to do anything. And so I would love $5 trillion. Look, the deficit's about $2 trillion a year. So we need to be saving a whole lot more money to get the budget in balance. But 1.6 is a start. And then I think we got to keep going from there.
Yeah, really good point. Sir, you are an eloquent and powerful voice for fighting anti-Semitism and standing by Israel during this extraordinary time in Middle East history and world history. Sometimes, every time Israel tries to assert its authority, immediately there's a cry. This is an unfair plan. This is genocide. They got all the different terms they use. I know you feel very strongly that Israel is justified in where it's headed over the next few weeks and where it's been working in the last few months. Tell us a little bit about what your colleagues on Capitol Hill tell you now that you've arrived on the scene here.
Well, I think there's broad support for Israel among most of the members. There's certainly some that don't, frankly, unfortunately, on both sides. But the fact of the matter is this: Muslim terrorists are holding 58 people hostage. And until they're released and Hamas unconditionally surrenders, Israel should do whatever they have to do to solve that problem. We did not go boo-hoo-hoo, the Nazis are getting beat, let's stop bombing and come up with a way to govern with them. We didn't do that with Hirohito. In fact, we nuked them twice. The first time they didn't get the message. So these people are bad people, and the solution to that is unconditional surrender.
Yeah. Speaking of Israel, Israel has the Iron Dome. President Trump wants the Golden Dome. He just selected a design that I think the price tag is about $175 billion. That actually seems quite low for something that, at least if it resembles the one in Israel, is an unbelievably advanced hunk of metal. We would have to have it stationed multiple places across the country, including Florida. Looking forward to something like that coming to your shores?
Well, look, I mean, we've got to make sure we can't get hit by a missile from somewhere. The hardest part of the Golden Dome is the math. I mean, what's amazing about the Iron Dome, and I say this to my kids whenever they complain about math, is the entire thing is a math problem. Yep. Predicting where one rocket will go in real time and shooting another rocket to intercept that. The only real difference between the U.S. and Israel is that we're bigger. So they ought to be able to come up with a pretty good estimate. And if they think $175 billion is enough, they know how much the Iron Dome costs. It's just something on a larger scale. I don't know that much technology needs to be invented. We know how to intercept rockets. Yeah. It's just we're a bigger country.
Yeah, just creating that web and making sure we're protected at all times is amazing. You talked about after the big, beautiful bill, and there's a lot more work I know you want to get to. What's top of mind for you? What are some of the priorities as we head into the summer if this big, beautiful bill gets through you'd like to see Congress jump to next?
Well, I think we've got to keep looking at spending. I mean, we have to look at all the things that DOJ came up with. The president has a budget. It has cuts. We can't stop at the big, beautiful bill if we want to save our country. Every great empire in history has risen and fallen, and you cannot spend money the way the United States is forever. The reason interest rates are so high is because we have to borrow so much money in order to fund the government and the past debt. If we want to make home ownership more affordable, if we want to make cars more affordable, if we want to make credit cards more affordable, if we want to make education more affordable, the government has to stop crowding out the private debt market. And the only way we do that is to get spending under control. Look, things went off the rails when we went from looking at government doing things that are good from all of us for taking money from one person and giving it to another. The purpose of government is not to give people money. The purpose of government is to take care of us all, and I'm going to be focused on trying to get us to remember that. I think my colleagues need to worry about what the voters say, but they need to worry about what their children will say. Because 20 or 30 or 40 years from now, if America's collapsed under the weight of the debt, our kids will not judge us favorably. And that's what I worry about even more than the next election.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about it. Sir, it's a great honor to have you in town. Great honor to have you on the show. I know we're going to do this a lot, but thank you for joining us today. Really good to have you on the show.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate your insights as always. All right, folks. A little bit earlier today, we had a chance to talk to the Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House, James Blair. He had a lot to say about this bill, what it can get done, and what Republicans need to do to pull it over the line. We're going to have that next, right after these messages. Hey folks, if you're a homeowner like me, you need to listen to this. In today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity is their target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. And that's when the problems begin, because they start taking out loans using your equity and even sell your property. And you're not even going to find out it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice months later. That's a nightmare, right? So when's the last time you checked on your home title? Well, if you're like me, the answer is never, right? You need to do something about that right now. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code JTN at HometitleLock.com and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes that might happen, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. That's a good deal. Find out why I trust Home Title Lock. Go to HometitleLock.com and use the promo code JTN. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN.
Life.
All right, folks, welcome back from the commercial break. We're very lucky to be joined by one of the key players inside the White House, helping to drive President Trump's successful agenda across the line. Of course, the big, beautiful bill, the next part of it. Joining us right now, the Deputy Chief of Staff for the White House, our good friend, James Blair. James, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys, how are you? Nice to see you.
Great to see you. I know you're busy at work day in and day out with all of these things that are stacking up. I want to talk about this big bill. Over 9 hours, Amanda wrote a really important story. It achieves like 30 years of conservative wish lists. This is probably dreams that go all the way back to the Reagan administration. How important is it to get this over the finish line, even with some of the bickering going on right now?
Getting this bill across the finish line, John, will be perhaps the single most important legislative achievement that most of these members of Congress have ever done in their career in Congress to date, and maybe some that will ever do. We'll see. Hopefully we get even better packages than this in the future. But you mentioned the wish list. Absolutely. First of all, it's a renewal of the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which was the biggest tax cut in American history that President Trump passed, right? And then on top of that, we have all of the tax cuts that the president campaigned on in 2024. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime pay, a huge tax cut for seniors on Social Security. And even with all of those tax cuts, John, it has the biggest spending reform in American history. It is twice the biggest number that has been passed any time recently, and that was almost 30 years ago under Bill Clinton. So we're getting the country on a better footing. We're doing massive tax cuts for the middle and working class while still improving the fiscal outlook of the country. And then there's just so many good things to love within that, and we can talk about all of it, but just a few to highlight, John. First of all, we're banning Medicaid dollars from going to medical providers that do transgender surgeries on minors, okay? This is the one and only chance to get that done. We are getting all of the money that we need to run a mass deportation operation, which the American people voted for and is still supported by a majority of the country, right? And once we get those people out of our country, particularly the criminals, we're also going to improve our fiscal outlook because we're going to get them off the public programs. We're kicking illegals off Medicaid. Millions of illegal immigrants are on Medicaid in this country. It's costing us hundreds of billions of dollars, and we're getting them all off the rolls. So that is just a little bit of a flavor, John, but there's just so much to love about it. It is an incredible bill. Like I said, it'll be the biggest piece of legislation that most of them have ever passed or will ever pass, and it's really going to get us off on the right foot.
Yeah. James, it was amazing to see because I think we all know kind of the behind the scenes numbers and what they were prior to President Trump going up to Capitol Hill yesterday. Maybe he should add Republican whip to his resume. But what was it that he said to those lawmakers? Because it certainly moved the needle with seemingly enough to get this closer to the finish line.
Absolutely. Look, the main thing was he said, we've got to get this done. Some people have a few things that they don't like necessarily, or they would like to have a little bit more of. But look, this is governing in a close majority. It's an incredible bill, and he wants to get it done now. And the alternative is far worse. We need to, there's some grandstanders out there, which the president has spoken about very clearly, that want to talk about, oh, it doesn't do enough here or there. Well, here's the facts. If we don't pass this bill, what actually happens is the largest tax hike in American history will happen at the end of this year. If we don't pass this bill, the country will default on its debt, which could possibly cause a global depression, right? But we're not. We're not going to fail. We're going to pass this bill. If we don't pass this bill, debt and deficit are going to skyrocket. So it is an extraordinarily good bill, and there's a little bit more work that's going to be done in the Senate, no doubt. So it's not even the end of the road. What's important here is we keep this bill moving. We move it along to the Senate. We continue to hammer out the process, but the alternative is far, far worse. And like I said, there's so much to love about it. So much of what everybody campaigned on, and especially the president campaigned on, is contained in this bill. Border security, tax cuts, deregulation, unleashing American energy, rebuilding our military so that we can get these peace deals done, right? Because peace is backed up through strength, which the president has always said very clearly. So now is not the time for grandstanding. Now is not the time for fundraising. Now is the time to govern. This is a governing majority. That's the moment we're in, and the president hopes that all members of Congress will meet the moment, and he expects they will ultimately.
Yeah, and they will. This is too big a moment to let squander. There's a seesaw that's happening right now. When the SALT tax deduction goes up, the spending hawks suddenly go down in support. One thing that's been talked about in the last 24 hours, I just want to run it by and see if the White House would think about this, is that in this bill, they can insert language that tells a president, if you can deliver president's priorities under the budget for below the number that the Congress appropriated, you can just simply send the money back to the Treasury. You don't have to do rescission. You don't have to do impoundment. It's sort of something between those two things. A lot of lawmakers have been talking about it privately in the last 24 hours. Would that be something, because the president's the master CEO, he could perhaps make savings that Congress couldn't envision in their appropriations? Would the White House be open to that concept?
Look, the White House has been on the front lines of reducing spending. It is the president who put DOGE in place to start rooting out the waste, fraud, and abuse. It is the president who has been the boldest president in American history to go after the waste and the corruption and the misuse of taxpayer dollars in the agencies in the executive branch. I mean, you know, it's funny, right? Sometimes in government, you never want to cut your own program. Well, it's the president cutting the executive branch agencies, right? So we're doing our part, and we are pushing Congress to do more. Look, we're going to look at that language. I think it is floating around. But what's most important, again, this is just the first step in a multi-step process. We've got to move this bill out of the House this week. We've got to get it over to the Senate. It's going to continue to get worked on a little bit. It'll come back to the House. And I think that we support all the spending reductions that we can do. But at the end of the day, we have to pass the bill. We have to get the votes and pass the bill. And under any circumstances, it will be by far the largest spending reductions in American history, by far anything that's been done in 3 decades, and will absolutely put the country on a better fiscal footing for the future. And here's the deal. To turn this battleship around, John, it's going to take a multi-step process. You know as well as I do that Joe Biden and the Democrats wrecked this country over a period of time. This is going to get us way out of the gate, get us really far in where we need to go to have prices down, to give people the tax relief they need, and to bring that spending down, get closer to budget neutral and balancing the budget. But we can't keep doing it if we lose the majority. And we've got to get this done. Then we can come back next year. We could do even more. And then we got to win and keep coming back. We need a full 4-year term, and we need everyone rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah, James, before we let you go on what you were just talking about, there's another huge benefit and an issue hanging over the head of Republicans, and that's the fact that they have only sent 5 bills to President Trump's desk to be signed. If Republicans keep the majority next year, that gives President Trump effectively 2 more years to govern without being hamstrung by a Democrat majority in the House. How important is that to President Trump? And is that a conversation happening on Capitol Hill? You know, hey, guys, we have to get this done or we're going to lose even more support from our base.
Look, I think that the American people voted for a specific agenda. I think voters vote on policy and the person leading the policy. President Trump campaigned on a specific set of policies, and right now he is trying to enact those. So much of what he campaigned on is frankly rolled up in this one big reconciliation bill. It is a huge domestic agenda bill, and that's why we call it the Big Beautiful Bill Act, because it is big and it is beautiful. But it is important that we deliver those promises, because that is what people voted for. That's what people want to see done. And I do believe it will be up to the Republicans on Capitol Hill. It'll be up to them what the politics are ultimately. But I think the politics are very simple. If you give people what was campaigned on, they reward you at the ballot box. If you say one thing on the campaign trail and do another when you're in office, I think they punish you at the ballot box. So it's not really that complicated.
Yeah, I think the president said it so brilliantly on election night during his victory speech. Promises made means promises kept, and you guys are delivering your part. It's Congress's turn to deliver their part. James, what a great honor to have you on the show today. I know how busy you are. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, back at you. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. What a great discussion. We'll have more just like that right after these messages. Hey, America, for decades, you've worked hard, paid your taxes, and stood by the values that built this great nation: honesty, accountability, and, of course, faith. But now you're seeing a government that's bloated, reckless, and in many cases, completely unaccountable. The good news: you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. President Trump is back in the White House, taking on unfair trade practices, fighting waste and fraud, and boldly reaffirming our Christian foundations. But even the strongest leaders need support from the people. That's why I recommend AMAC, the conservative alternative for Americans 50 and over who still believe in truth, transparency, and the Constitution. For just $16 a year, you'll receive the AMAC magazine, access to exclusive money-saving discounts, and become part of a community that's holding government accountable. Now go join today at amac.us/justnews. Again, that's amac.us/justnews. Facts matter, your voice matters, and with AMAC, they're both being heard. Welcome back, America. Just a couple hours ago, President Trump met with the Freedom Caucus, the budget deficit hawks in the Republican Party. They're concerned that some concessions made to blue state Republicans drove up the cost of the bill again. They want to try to get some more savings. In a few seconds, we're going to be joined by a member of the Freedom Caucus, Congressman Andy Ogles. He's going to join us. He's just wrapping up some business in Congress. Amanda, I want to talk for a second about some of the things that James Blair talked about. He has very clear messaging that Republicans can't squander this once-in-a-generation opportunity to pass the bill. But he also said something that I think is lost in the conversation. Just because we pass this bill doesn't mean we're not going to keep trying to cut spending. Yeah. And I think you heard that from Congressman Fine as well. There are multiple bites at shrinking the size of government that are going to occur in the summer and the fall, the budget process, the 13 appropriations bill, which they've never done, but maybe this year they will. What are you hearing from your side? The White House has plans beyond this, right?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, what I'm hearing is that they better make this happen, and they better make the spending cuts stick, and they better even expand them, because the American people, the Republican base, it may not be that they will show up and vote for a Democrat, but they may just not show up next November unless they start seeing some successes. And this would be a huge win. The
simplest math in elections: promises made, promises delivered.
Very transactional.
Very. And voters are going to do that. We're lucky to be joined right now. I understand we have Congressman Andy Ogles right now from the great state of Tennessee. Hello, sir. Good to have you on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We love having you on. You're in the middle of so much of the big stuff going on in history. Right. What can you tell us transpired, if you have any readout of what happened between President Trump and the Freedom Caucus members at the 3 o'clock meeting today?
Yeah, positive progress. You know, we're not there yet. I mean, if the vote was held right now, the votes aren't there. And part of the issue or the sticking point is Medicaid. You know, roughly, for example, you have 15 million people on Medicaid that are able-bodied, meaning that they can have a job, and they have no income. They're not working. And I think what that means is that you and I pay for that, and the American people wants everybody to pay their fair share. And one of the things the president talked about was the waste, the fraud, and the abuse. And what we've seen is states like California, like New York, flooding their rolls with these able-bodied individuals who aren't working. And quite frankly, they get reimbursed at a higher rate than a single pregnant mom, which is absolutely ridiculous. But by doing that, you're screwing the rest of the state. And so the Medicaid reimbursement for the state of California is larger than the entire budget of Florida. And so there's some things in there that would be some significant savings. And quite frankly, it gets people back to work, paying their fair share, if you will. But again, positive progress. The tax cuts don't expire to the end of the year, so we do have a little bit of time. Speaker Johnson put the deadline there of Memorial Day. Again, if the vote was held right now, they don't have the votes. But we'll see over the next few hours as we work on this. We work to make it better. John Quincy Adams loved the House because this is where you argue and debate, and that's what the Freedom Caucus is doing, is trying to make this bill better.
Yeah. Well, and that able-bodied work requirement is a 70-30, 80-20 issue. Americans, by and large, support that.
That's right.
We've been focusing so much on the horse trading on the Republican side. I'm curious, is there any chance in China that any Democrats might support this if they are in a swing district?
I would fall out of my chair if that happened. I don't think so. Maybe we get surprised with that. But look, because it's Trump's plan, it's the Republican agenda. I can't imagine any of them will support it. But again, let's make it better. Most of the savings that's being talked about don't happen until the back half of the bill. So those first 5 years, you see a lot of deficit spending. The bond market reacted today to the fact that we continue to have deficit spending. So this bill needs some work. It's big. It's not quite beautiful yet, but we continue to work on it. Obviously, I'm a big fan. I'm a supporter of President Trump. We want to get this done. But we also, like you said earlier in this segment, promises were made to the American people to start cutting, to hold people accountable, to get rid of the abuse, the waste, and the fraud, and that's what we're trying to do.
When you look out, are there one or two concrete ideas that you like and say, boy, that would seal the deal for me, or that would seal the deal for a lot of my good colleagues in the Freedom Caucus, which are truly the legitimate debt fighters? They have been on the front lines of this for the longest time.
Yeah, so, there's two things for me in particular, and I think most of the Freedom Caucus would agree with me. I can't speak for them, obviously, but is moving up the work requirements. Or initially, they didn't kick in until 2029. That's, several years from now, President Trump wouldn't even be in office. So moving those up to the near term, the end of next year. And then also when you look at the Medicaid reimbursement. So again, if a state spends $1, they're getting $1.33 for a pregnant mom. But if someone's an illegal or able-bodied and not working, states like California, if they spend $1, they're getting $9. And so again, they're incentivized to add these people to the rolls. That's a 7-fold multiplier. States like Tennessee, Florida, Wisconsin that did not expand their Medicaid populations, that money isn't coming to them. And quite frankly, if we don't tweak that in some fashion, you're actually incentivizing states to expand Medicaid, which again, that eats up a lot of your savings that are being talked about if suddenly 10 states expand Medicaid populations.
That's amazing.
Sir, I certainly hear you that there's a lot of work to be done, but there is a section of this bill that seems like it is pretty darn great, and that's the border and immigration provisions, allowing for 1 million deportations a year, finishes the border wall, allows for 10,000 new ICE personnel, 5,000 new customs officers, 3,000 new Border Patrol agents. It seems to me that if the next president is a Democrat, this makes it so much harder for a new president on the other side of the aisle to reopen the border like Joe Biden did, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And again, there is a lot of great stuff in this bill, but there's some things in there that need to be repaired. But, again, the House Freedom Caucus, we proposed a 2-bill solution where you could address things like the border, like the tax cuts and those things, signal to the markets that we're getting serious about, again, immigration, illegal immigration, but also making the tax cuts permanent. But obviously, the bigger a bill is, the more complicated it becomes. And it's not going to be perfect, but that's what we're working on. But like you said, fixing the border, I was just in El Salvador, went to the prison where they're sending illegals. The president down there is doing a fantastic job, and we appreciate him working with us and taking illegal immigrants. And quite frankly, it's some of the worst that society has to offer. I mean, we talked to one MS-13 gang member down there who had killed 50 people. He joined the gangs when he was 13 here in America, and over the course of his career has murdered 50 people. I mean, this is who's being deported. This is who's being targeted. Quite frankly, if you're here illegally, you got to go.
Yeah, that's a mind-numbing fact. One guy,
yes, for sure.
50 guys, 15 people. It's amazing. Sir, one last quick question, because it's been floating around the last couple of days. It has a genesis on the show where some of the discussion began. There's a proposal floating around that says it could be added into this language of the bill as it gets approved, that says if a president can deliver an appropriation cheaper because he got better contracting, better management, he can send the money right back to Treasury. He doesn't have to go through rescission or impoundment. Your thoughts on a common sense idea? Hey, if we got a good president and can negotiate good deals, of course you should be able to send the money back to the Treasury.
Yeah, I mean, so as we go forward and we look for additional savings, the rescission process, again, if you can get a better deal, art of the deal, why not send that money back to the Treasury? So anything that's going to help us cut our budget and again, partially cut our way out of this debt problem we have. Part of it too is we got to grow the economy. There's not enough discretionary spending to cut to quote unquote fix this ballooning debt. So we're going to have to grow some more. But we've got to cut everywhere we can. And again, let's start with the waste, fraud, and abuse. And again, if President Trump can get a better deal on a hammer or a screwdriver or whatever, an airplane, then let's send that money back to Treasury for the American people.
Yeah, that's a win-win for everyone. Congressman, always great to have you on the show. So many great common sense ideas, and I know how hard you work. You're always working the circuit trying to get something good for the American people. Great to have you on the show today.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We got a treat for you. Normally, we just hand off to him at the end of the show, but today we're going to bring Grant Stinchfield in the studio here to talk to us for a little bit. He's got a lot of big news, and of course, always one of the best shows on the network. I love it. He'll be with us in just a few seconds. And one and only Grant Stinchfield right after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. We have a very special guest to bring to you. Look, if Hollywood can do it, we can do it too. We're going to have a crossover segment. He's our colleague over here on Real America's Voice, the host of Stinchfield Tonight, which airs right after our show, Grant Stinchfield. Grant, great to see you tonight.
I'll tell you what, guys, it's so great to join you on your show, and I love having you lead into me. It's an honor, so thank you for inviting me.
Likewise, absolutely. So we just had Congressman Andy Ogles on the show, and he was very real with our audience that this bill is good. Maybe it's moving a little closer to great, but it is by no means perfect. And I know that you've been very real with your audience, too, about some of the stuff you don't like. Let it rip.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling people, don't be too critical of the people that are pushing back against some of the things that we've got concerns on. I mean, we're raising the debt ceiling to a level that is unheard of. You talk about $5 trillion. You just heard Andy Ogles talk about the Medicaid expenditures. California getting $9 for every one they spend, and other states like Tennessee getting stuck with not nearly as much money. That's not good. Work requirements. It's interesting, the SALT tax. I'm not really all that against it. I understand you want to punish Democrat states, blue states that have real high tax structures, but I'm a believer that I fight for lower taxes all the time. And so if I can convince someone in California or New York, look what Republicans did for you in Washington. We lowered what you could pay in income taxes because we gave you a bigger deduction that was there at one point. Maybe we sway them away from Gavin Newsom. I'm not going to argue for more taxes. And I think if you pay local taxes, why shouldn't I be able to deduct that to pay another government? So I just don't like giving governments money. Democrats, Republicans, I'll fight for everybody, even if Democrats disagree with me on what I think is right. So I don't want people to go after these men and women that are standing up to try to cut spending. But I'll put it the most simple way possible. If I was a Freedom Caucus member, I would take this right down to the wire. I would be threatening no vote, but in the end, I know the positives far outweigh the negatives. We've got to get through these Trump tax cuts, and I would be a yes vote at the end, no matter what, for two reasons. Quite frankly, because President Trump wants it, and I'll be honest, I've never seen a president that I would give, everything to. I mean, this guy really pulls some strings because I trust him so much. I've never seen the power of somebody like this to sway people. Maybe it's because he can destroy people with a couple spoken sentences. But in the end, I give President Trump the leeway, the runway, give him what he wants, let him put this economy on track to win, and I'd be a yes vote in the end, but it wouldn't stop me from fighting for the things I believe in, cutting spending and not raising the debt ceiling.
Yeah, that's really important. You talked about President Trump and his effort, and it's really quite remarkable. I mean, Joe Biden barely ever talked to Congress directly. Here you got 2 or 3 meetings over a course of a day or two. He's really invested, and he's right alongside them. He keeps talking with them. In the first administration, I don't think he knew how to deal with Congress. It was like an unusual beast to him. He's really learned the art of how to negotiate with them and to bring the different factions together like a CEO does in divisions. Watching him mature and seeing him being able to use the art of the deal on his own party, it's really something to watch. It's unlike any president I've seen in my lifetime.
No, it's amazing, John, and I think this is a tribute to the MAGA movement in general. So the power of the MAGA movement and President Trump as the leader. Look, I was a member of the Tea Party movement. I ran for Congress back in 2011 into 12 when the Tea Party was at its height. There was no voter that would support any idea of raising the debt ceiling, much less $5 trillion. Yet if President Trump says he wants it, he gives cover to every fiscal conservative to go back home and tell his voters, I gave President Trump what he wanted. What do you want me to do? And every voter at home would say, give President Trump what he wants, and they'd give him the leeway to vote on things like this. So it's really a tribute to the movement that he created and the power of it.
Yeah. Grant, I want you to put your analyst hat on because we've seen a number of world leaders meet with President Trump in the Oval Office, and we've seen it go one of two ways. You've got the camp where it's Bukele and Javier Milei, even Mark Carney to some degree, lovely, warm reception, great conversations, constructive conversations. And then you have the Zelenskys, and then earlier today, to some degree, the South African leader, where, a little bit of pushback on some of these issues. What's the secret sauce for a world leader? I saw some someone earlier say that going to the Oval Office is like going to the principal's office for world leaders, which I think is an apt description. What's the common denominator between these folks who go to the Oval Office and it does turn out to be a really great meeting?
Well, I think the people that have a really great meeting, either two things happen. Either they're sincere about freedom. You mentioned Malay and others that really believe in the MAGA movement and are trying to bring that to their countries. Those people are going to be very successful with President Trump. The other way to do this, quite frankly, is you got to bow down and kiss the ring. America is the greatest nation in the world. These countries need us. Whether they want to admit it or not, they need us. They need President Trump. They need the safety and security that we bring. They need our economy. So, you know what? You better be nice to us and knock off the craziness. You know I've never been a big fan of Zelensky. I don't think, and I'm not a big fan of Putin either, but I'm not a big fan of Zelensky and how he's handled this and some of his motivations. And I'm certainly not a big fan of what's going on in South Africa. So you have two of those guys come in, and I don't know. You know, Zelensky's got these ego problems. You can't bring ego into the Oval Office with President Trump. It's just not going to work. It's like oil and water. So either believe in freedom and be kind, or kiss the ring and give President Trump lots of compliments. You're not going to get an argument with him if you do those things.
You should teach diplomacy school to all the other foreign presidents. That was good. That was good advice. Grant, what do you got planned on the show tonight? I tune in every night after we get off here. I just love it. Yeah. What's up tonight?
Well, you're kind to say that, John. We're going to talk a lot about this big bill, a lot of the things that you've been talking about here. And then, you know, these Venezuelan hostages being held, American hostages. We've been covering this over the last 3 weeks. Finally, we have one release. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We've got another family coming on Friday. I've really taken it to heart to get these families home from Venezuela, American families. So that will continue the fight for.
You're not going to let anyone forget their names or their plight. That's an incredible work as a journalist. Right. Great work.
Absolutely. Grant Stinchfield, this was a lot of fun. We're going to have to do this more often. We're going to have to meet like this more often.
Anytime you want, guys. Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody. You can check out that guy in about 11 minutes when our show ends. That's because he follows us on our programming calendar. He's Grant Stinchfield. And then right now we're going to go to a commercial break because we've got a few more final thoughts before we head out. Welcome back, everybody. Just a few topics to hit before we go. We were talking over the break about Jake Tapper and his belligerent denial that he covered up anything. And as it turns out, the American people, not only do they get the sense that there was a cover-up, but they are also very concerned about it. In fact, in a Rasmussen poll, I believe it was 72% of respondents said that it was a very serious issue if there were AIDS and folks
very serious
around.
Scandal.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. Yeah, listen, Jake Tapper is doing a wonderful book to revise history of his own role in this. If you were that bad a journalist that you couldn't tell that the president had mental decline, and by the way, you can be in mental decline and still be making a lot of the calls, even though you might not be available some of the time to make the calls. So Joe Biden still owns all the decisions of his White House, which I've always said he should own it. He doesn't get a pass just because he was mental decline. But you can, but it's the same network and the same anchor and the same people that try to tell us that the laptop wasn't true. And, we can just go through, look at all the people he interviewed, all the propaganda he perpetrated on the American people. And writing a book, giving conservatives a little of what they want right now, I think is kind of doing a disservice to journalism. It'd be much better to say, you know what? I should have been a better journalist and called it out sooner. And I'll do a better job going forward. I'd admire that more than his. I don't remember cutting people off and we got hoodwinked. You didn't get hoodwinked. You bought into it.
Yeah, and I see two scenarios here with Jake Tapper. One of them, if you've ever seen Anchorman, remember scenes where Ron Burgundy would just mindlessly read the teleprompter? Yeah. It's either that Jake Tapper mindlessly reads the teleprompter, and the teleprompter is what told him to say, to basically guilt Americans into thinking that there was something wrong with them for thinking that something was wrong with Joe Biden, telling people that, you're shame on you for making fun of a stutter. It's either that or he is absolutely lying through his teeth. And there's a reputation there. His reputation precedes him, is what I'll say.
Yeah. Listen, CNN's reputation precedes him. It precedes it, and I think we're in a point now where most Americans just don't take these guys serious. These people in the chair, whether they're women or men in these legacy media, they don't trust the anchors anymore because they've been misled too many times. And I'm honored to be on a network where we've been really working hard to give you the truth. Sometimes painfully so because people censor us or they cut off our advertising because we told you the truth. But I'd rather tell you the truth and be poor than lie and have a few extra bucks. So
absolutely. Yep. All right. So Vice President J.D. Vance favored to win the GOP presidential nomination in 2028, but he did say if he does end up running, he said, I'm not entitled to it. And that's what people love about J.D. Vance. It is that hometown humility. It's just great.
Yeah, he's going to work for it. And that's what the meritocracy of an election is, or the meritocracy of America is. Listen, J.D. Vance has been an incredible asset to the president. Whether he's presidential material, it's way too early. He's got 3 years of work to do for the president. But he is so important in helping the president navigate Congress. I think he'll be the guy that helps deliver the India trade deal, which will be the precursor to a China trade deal. He's a really important player, and a lot of vice presidents are window dressing. Kamala Harris was. You could tell there wasn't a whole lot of love between him or President and Mrs. Biden. But J.D. Vance is at the table every day with the president. I think that's pretty darn unique.
Yeah. And President Trump is on a stage all by himself. He typically doesn't even have to share the stage with anyone. But there is a point in a second term for a president where they start actively and demonstrably lifting their vice president and putting them out in the public. When do you think that happens for J.D.?
I don't think it's going to happen with Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump doesn't play to the conventional rules of politics, and I think he would like to see who's the strongest guy.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think he said that already, which is, J.D. isn't a lock on it. I like Marco a lot, too. I think he'll let the blood sport of politics go because he knows it forges a better candidate. People who get anointed turned out to be really bad candidates. Just ask Kamala Harris. Working for it is the best way, and it's the way our founding fathers intended to work. And I think Donald Trump's not going to put his thumb in the scale.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so speaking of Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, among like half a dozen other jobs. Yeah. I told you earlier, I would give him, if there were governmental badges, I would give him the badge for most improved. It's not that he wasn't great before. It's just that there were a lot of folks who were skeptical about how much he subscribed to President Trump's anti-war America First agenda, but he is doing a bang-up job.
He is. He knows his role, and he's a very smart man. He's a very eloquent communicator, and he's applied all of that. And I just want to remind people this. It was in the Just the News, but I don't think a lot of media are talking about it. He's cut the size of the State Department in half. Find me any other federal agency that's done that. Yeah. And by the way, in explaining it to Congress, he got praise, not derision. Now, the Democrats deride him, but he was able to punch them back and make it hurt. I mean, his comebacks were really powerful. But what other person has come in less than 5 months and figured out how to shrink a government by half and keep it, as he said, this is the most important. He said, we've been irrelevant because we don't do the things the State Department's supposed to do. That was a really powerful moment. Yeah, I think he has been the one of the early MVPs of the Trump administration. Susie Wiles, clearly not out front and center like Rubio, but keeps the ship running. Lee Zeldin with the regulatory busting. Those are three big MVPs of this early presidency. Obviously, Donald Trump, top of the food chain on that.
Yeah. So, as many of you know, I have started writing over at Just the News, flexing some new muscles or trying to build some new muscles. And a lot of times you give me assignments that I'm so passionate about, and they are absolutely necessary and important for people to read. But the one that I have prepared that I think we're going to end up putting out on Friday, actually, you weren't on the morning call, so you may not even know about it.
I don't even know it.
I'm just going to highlight some of these health initiatives that have happened over the last 20 years or so that have been led by Democrats. And it's all spurned from the Senate Appropriations Committee hearing yesterday, where Washington Senator Patty Murray laid into RFK Jr. and he had said something to the effect of, you have been in office for 32 years and Americans are sicker now than they've ever been. So I'm going to highlight why they're sicker and who's responsible.
And tomorrow, I think we're going to have Senator Ron Johnson on. Hopefully, what a bombshell he dropped today. What an important piece of work. He's been the bulldog.
That's my story.
There we go. I like it. Good idea.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And a special thanks to Grant Stinchfield for dipping into work early. He's going to catch you on the other side of this break in about 2 minutes. Until then, have a great night.